Welcome to yet another episode of Innovation Oddysey. Today I have with me in the studio someone very special. He's Brian Lee, who is the co-founder and chief product officer at Roamli and also the managing partner at Gildre. Welcome, Brian, to the podcast.
Hey, Renu. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, it's which part of the world are you in?
So I am based in Chicago currently, lived here for about 20 years and grew up in New York. So primarily East Coast to Midwest for most of my life.
Oh, I was in Chicago for 8 years. So this brings back a lot of good memories for me.
That's right. Because then you're overseas now in Switzerland, I believe, right? So just switched it up a little bit.
Yes, I did. I moved from the new world to the old world.
That's exciting, though. It's definitely, Chicago it's a phenomenal spot. I love living here and would advocate it for everyone, but definitely, and we actually just got back from the Bahamas too. So it's definitely a very big contrast going from, 80 degrees to, and this is like summer, right? Anytime it's 40 in Chicago in December and January, I'm happy. So it's definitely a shock at first, but invite anyone.
Yeah, I remember those really cold, dark December and January nights. It is really hard to get used to them.
It makes up for it in the summer, so come then for sure.
Exactly. Okay, let's bring this back to you. I always like to start with the 30-second elevator pitch of who you are and what you do. So I leave it to you.
Sounds good. Hopefully don't tie me on this too tightly, but just myself. So I've started my career in big CPG at Hershey Company, Ferrero Group, worked my way through smaller startups into product, then moved into the tech product side, started my entrepreneurial journey, actually opening up escape rooms throughout the United States. And before I started with my co-founder, Bane, with Roamli, which is a MarTech, really B2B SaaS travel tech company. And so launched that in 2020. Since then, really got comfortable with the entrepreneurial ecosystems, with accelerators and incubators and other communities and groups of the sort. And then launched Gildre here in June of 2023, really focused on building these meaningful connections across the tech and really entrepreneurial ecosystem globally. And so that's been really a fun project that we've been looking on growing alongside with Roamli and what led me to my role today.
Oh, fantastic. I hear a lot of things that I want to ask you about. So let me start with the escape rooms. That's interesting. Why escape rooms and where?
Yeah, so that one started. So my co-founder, one of my best friends from high school and college growing up, he was teaching English in Japan through the JET program once we graduated from college. And so myself and some other friends went to go visit him back. This is in like 2014, I would say, and got the chance to really kind of go out there and see escape rooms and do an escape room before they were really kind of mainstream or even growing in the States. And we thought it was really cool. And so at that time when I came back after that, he moved back to Chicago and I was in Boston at the time with Hershey. And he brought it up, hey, we should consider opening a room. And we had another high school friend, her and her partner had opened a room in Manhattan, Kansas. And so kind of brainstormed with them. This at the time in Illinois, there were probably only about 5 or 6 in the state. And so we thought, hey, let's just go for it. So we opened our first one there in the Evanston area, kind of by Northwestern University, and just expanded a little bit from there and just buying and kind of working with other operators across the country as that industry was kind of burgeoning. And so that was a really just fun experience into relatively low risk entrepreneurial ventures, where at the time it was, right nowadays, you really can't start a room or open up a company for less than what seems like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 per room. At the time, we were building everything ourselves, right? So it still cost us probably about 10 to 15, but we didn't have the crazy level of contractors. And believe me, I'm not the most handy person either. I can, hammer nails or screw things and, basic carpentry, but that's the extent of my labor. So that was a good venture for us. And then obviously with COVID, right, that was we were able to sell some, and we still have the one up in Evanston, but most people during the pandemic did not want to get locked in a room with strangers during that time period. So it was, I think it was a shock for the industry, certainly just like so many others. But those that kind of rode it out or were able to survive, through that, I think it was probably better for the industry as a whole, since it really peaked from when we opened, right? There were about 6 or 7 rooms in Illinois. At its peak, there were probably about 60 or 70. And now it's kind of fallen back to a nice mid-level of undersaturation, probably around 20 or 30 in the state.
What was the name of your escape room?
So it's called Lock Chicago. Still here. So,
what is it called?
Yeah, Lock Chicago Escape Rooms. And
very nice.
The last that we called it that because we actually opened in Chicago and realized this was our first ever business, right? This was in my kind of early 20s. Didn't understand, fully about permitting. And I think we were like 2 yards within like a school zone, and you can't have like an entertainment or recreation facility. So because a little bit of a gut punch losing the first 3 months rent because we had to put the deposit down and all that, only to find out we couldn't operate. So we decided to keep the name and actually moved up to Evanston, which is somewhat similar to where we grew up. And this was back in 2015. So luckily it's worked out since then.
Wow. I guess the first learnings from any entrepreneurial venture are just generally painful.
Yeah.
But then, you learn from your mistakes and you move forward. So
yeah, absolutely. I would say it's for an entrepreneur. I think it's important, and it's funny. My dad kind of taught me this about gambling too. It's like when they say the first time you go to a casino or play, it's almost better you lose so you don't get like hooked onto that feeling of winning. And I think, of course, it's important to share your wins, but with entrepreneurship, the quicker, and I'm sure lots of other people will echo the same sentiment, the quicker you fail or have that hard lesson or learn early on, it's probably better, right, than figuring that out months and years after working on your product or developing. So luckily, we got plenty of losses and learning or opportunities early into the journey.
And how did that link with your journey in the food industry? When I say food, it's the Hershey's and the Gallery experience. What did you do there?
Yeah, so initially it was in sales, so like field sales. So I'd like to think that I was kind of in the remote landscape before it was, trendy with the pandemic and whatnot. But it was my first job out of college, and I was a political science major. So not even super relevant to anything that I'd been doing, but was like territory sales. So it was going store by store, calling on the Walmarts, or you're in Chicago. So when you were in Chicago, you probably remember the Jewels and the Dominick's and those types of chains. And so was going literally store to store and then working with the managers there to, when we had promotions running for Halloween or just like throughout the year, s'mores promotions during the summer with Twizzlers, things like that. So it was a lot of fun just going store to store, right? And when I moved out to Boston, it was to manage a team specifically on convenience stores, right? C-stores. So out east, it was like the Cumberland Farms and the 7-Elevens and obviously the mom and pop shops as well. And so from there, when I moved back to Chicago for an opportunity with Ferrero Group and Ferrara Pan Candy Company, that was more on like the account management side and eventually transitioned towards product. So working with larger customers as well to develop specific pack types and SKUs and the stuff that you find if you go to like Costco, right? It's, here's like a 40 pack of gummy bears and versus like this 36 count versus like the giant one. So just kind of these differentiating packages that customers enjoy. So that was really my first foray into product before transitioning more to the tech side and the actual platform and front and back end side of apps, which was a whole new world for me. And that's what my friend and co-founder taught me a lot about.
So I have to ask a question. I really do, because of my background as a health economist comes up here. When you work in the candy industry, how do you think about the public health repercussions of sugar?
That's a great question. And I won't speak for either company and their corporate end, of course, right? But I think for me, and it was the example, so I grew up also, I guess you could call it in a CPG family. My mom was at Kraft for over 30 years. And so I remember as a kid, she would come home and she would, go spend a lot of time in Zurich and Switzerland as well, just all across the globe. And she would bring back the giant Toblerone bars or the giant Milkas and a lot of the different candy and snacks from that end. And I never grew up as like a sweets person. And I think a lot of people, they like both, right? But you either kind of fall into like the salty treats, like snacks, chips realm, or like candy and cookies and things like that. And so for me, working at Hershey, and what Hershey's done a great job of more recently is really kind of branching out. So when they purchased, I believe it was called like Amplified Snacks and Brands, which is this like better for you beef jerky company out west. And then I think they bought like Skinny Pop and some of these others. So instead of just being that traditional Hershey chocolate bar type company, they've obviously gotten a lot of phenomenal brands there, but they also kind of diversified and understood, right? A lot of people don't just want these one kind of type snacks. They want things that, quote unquote, better for you, or at least less guilty being able to enjoy. And I see not just Hershey, right? A lot of companies in that same realm. And that was, I think, the same approach that I used as a seller when I was working with our headquarter accounts, was understanding it's no different than when you look at tech, right? Or anyone else. Do you understand your shopper, your consumer, who's using your product, or who's coming to your stores? And what can we create, or how can we really help you continue to drive them in, right? Or create things that they want to buy at your locations. And so that was a big piece of, I think, training me to think with that product mindset. But again, to your original question, yeah, it does start with, are people only going, I mean, there are, right? There's plenty of people that only want just the standard, chocolate bar, and that's the only thing they want. But I think just like any good product, right? It's leaning into what works and then finding new ways to innovate. Whether it's healthier alternatives or a new flavor, anything like that.
Do you still follow the progress of these companies?
From time to time, yeah. I had the privilege of making a lot of amazing friends and colleagues and, bosses and people I reported to. So through the wonders of, technology and LinkedIn and everything else, it's always great, still keeping in touch. And these are such big and phenomenal companies, right? So everyone was kind of spread out all over. So yeah, it was just a great chance to still, even though this was, over a decade ago, still keep in touch with a lot of the team members I kind of grew up in the industry with.
And then you moved from there into the accelerator world. What drew you there?
Yeah, that coincided nicely with what we were doing at Roamli at the time. And for myself and for Bonnie, that was our first really startup venture, right? So we had started with escape rooms, kind of got the more traditional brick and mortar entrepreneurial route, right? Dealing with our landlord and dealing with customers and promotions and permits on the sidewalk and things like that. And moving into this realm where, okay, great, we don't have rent, but we have these enormous server costs, or we have these, right? Like, how do we create these digital products around the consumer? And through that journey, right, we really planned on that, spawned from a trip myself, Bonnie, and another college friend took in Edinburgh, Dublin. And our friend there, who was our third friend, who was really kind of the tour guide, he had unfortunately come down with pneumonia after a hike we did. And this was in like December. So the weather was actually not bad, but it was like still probably 40 or 50, but it was also raining. And then we had done this like outdoor hike. And so we got him antibiotics, and the healthcare system in Ireland was phenomenal. And so he was kind of quarantined to like the back end of the Airbnb, while we were just like, all right, we'll just go walk around and explore, and didn't really have an itinerary, in the sense that a lot of times people use Yelp for restaurants or more of those kind of traditional sites, TripAdvisor maybe for like the big major attractions. Chicago, I'm sure that's like the Bean, right? Or these big things that everyone, the Sears Tower or Willis Tower, right? Things you go on that end. But there really wasn't anything for us. We wanted to just kind of see what the locals saw, or just, hey, like this cool alley with murals, or these cool monuments and statues and architectural, buildings and things like that. And there really wasn't anything like that at the time, at least that we knew of. And so that's what prompted Roamli. And through that discovery and through that launch, we launched in May of 2020. So also not phenomenal timing given the pandemic, but I think there was a lot we thought we knew and a lot we just clearly didn't know, and we're still learning. And so that was what led us to kind of really explore more about the accelerator world and incubators, and even just general programs like the Draper University program that we did for their like online certificate, and a bunch of other routes just to meet entrepreneurs and learn more. And so through that end, had the opportunity to really go full time and join an accelerator down in Austin, which was a really fun opportunity just again to meet some amazing founders, really, really cool people working on the project. And I think for me, it was just to be able to expand, the ability to meet other entrepreneurs and other innovators trying to do the same things across multiple industries, right? Not just marketing tech and SaaS, but healthcare and health tech and fintech and CPG and products as well.
And maybe for the audience, you can explain what Roamli does?
Yeah, of course. And so when we started Roamli, it was that exact same concept, the idea of, Renu, if you were going to Cape Town and you wanted to find some of the cool things to see in the area, or you were just traveling for a work trip and you had 8 hours before your meeting or before your next flight back home. The goal was to help you find, you could build a route. Let's say you're in the city center and you want to work your way to this neighborhood. You could build, all right, here's like a 3-mile route. I want to see the coolest murals and architecturally significant buildings and statues, let's call it that, right? And it would build you this route with all the different things to see. Maybe it's 20 different things, all the different information and details about the artist or the sculptor and things like that. And so that was the initial purpose. And granted, when we launched, not so many people were traveling at the time, but it really did help. We had an early customer base of people who, right, were at the time, that was one of the safest things you could do, was to be outside and just go out, right, versus go to dinner or go to the bar and things like that. So that was the initial purpose. And through our journeys of, talking to other founders, incubators, accelerators, things like that, we were able to go and pivot our model to be more of that kind of community-facing side, right, B2B side, where there were so many businesses like our escape room at the time, right, that were struggling to bring in new customers, new consumers, people to essentially, support their business. And for us, that was where we pivoted now to being able to work with chambers and destination marketing organizations, art institutions and art groups to be able to help promote their community and their businesses, whether it's to locals or people traveling in. And so Roamli helps create these fun interactive maps and scavenger hunts and walking tours and activities that these groups and organizations can use to promote the businesses and sites in their community.
So when did you start Roamli?
Was in 2018 was when we started development technically. And it was quite the journey, because I am not also, just as I'm not a full-time contractor with escape rooms, I'm also not the full-time developer. And so my co-founder pretty much wrote the tens to hundreds of thousands of lines of code by himself, both front and back end. And we worked with some UI UX design teams to be able to really flesh this out. But yeah, by the time we launched 2 years after, that was as of May in 2020. So pretty much at the height of the pandemic when it was coming around.
How many people are there in Roamli now?
Yeah, so we've got about 10,000 users or so far from like the individual side, because we still kept that model around just to be able to say, all right, perfect. If you still wanted to go to Chicago, you could go see, here's a haunted tour of Chicago, right? Maybe some of the most haunted or spookiest sites. Here's an architecture tour. And those are all free, right? It's just fun to go. You could just go pull it up. Cool, I want to work my way down from downtown to the Loop up to Lincoln Park or the Harbor. And you could kind of just do this for fun. So while we haven't actively been like promoting that, it's just fun to see people use it and just join and try it out. But most of our, when it comes to like the enterprise side and our DMOs and chambers of commerce in those groups, that's really what been our biggest focus in working with cities like downtown Dayton or here in Evanston in Chicago, or different art groups to help promote all of their businesses and sites really to the community.
Do you want to integrate other services in there, like food and other kinds of entertainment, like theater?
Sure, that's a good question. I think for us, yes, on really the community side. So when we look at these groups and these organizations that help promote their businesses, yes, on those sites. So we almost we have some groups that say, hey, like you can build, if you're visiting City X, you can build like a date night, right? So here's like, I want to do a 3-hour activity, right? So you go have drinks at this, bar, go have dinner here, go see a show at the outdoor, theater or amphitheater here. So we've done small things like that where you can build and incorporate individual businesses for kind of what we call the free roam, or just like go out and explore. That we wanted to stick to like all free things, if you will, right? Things that you could go as a local who's lived there for 20 years. And hey, I always sit at this one bench in this park and I always have lunch and look at this kind of mural as people walk by and things like that. So we wanted to keep the free roaming aspect obviously available just to anything that the city offers. And then the other side that the community and businesses offer, yes, are certainly open to dining and the other recreational ventures that you would find in the city.
Would it be right to categorize Roamli as like TripAdvisor with maps?
Yes and no. I think where TripAdvisor is a great product, right? But that hones in more of the individual side, right? If you wanted to go and find something, right? And believe me, right, from having our escape rooms and also being listed on TripAdvisor and Yelp and Google, right? We've seen the other side of it where how these companies tend to rank you or like how they allow reviews through isn't always conducive to different businesses. But with Roamli, yes, it is a kind of very map-friendly feature, but I think it's more the idea of, and hope maybe some people can relate to this, right? I feel like when people travel, and I know my spouse does this too, but like there's always so much planning that goes into things, right? Whether it's looking at blogs or looking at, talking to friends and talking to, whether it's like a travel agent or people that just know the region, right? There's dozens of hours that you could spend just researching where the place to stay is or what to do each day. And the idea behind Roamli initially, and still kind of is to be able to say, hey, I want to find something to do now. We almost want to eliminate that paradox of choice and say, hey, it's a beautiful day. I just want to go out and see something cool. I've got a couple hours to go explore and kill. How do I do that, right? And Roamli will build you this A to B route, or you can see, right, these are different fun activities that you could do right in your area, right? Or if you're in Chicago, if you're in a suburb, if you're in Missouri, right? Or Arkansas, anywhere in the world, there's going to be something there. And that was the idea. So that way you don't have to, of course you can still, there's always a place to be able to read bloggers and TripAdvisors and all that. But if you're more of that kind of just free flowing, want to go wander and explore a city, then Roamli is a nice fit in that realm.
I see. Can I use it in Europe?
Yes, absolutely. So we've got most of our stuff in North America, but some of the other major hubs, right? We do have challenges and sites there. So it just depends which city, but yeah, it's available worldwide technically right now.
Fantastic. I did not know that. So in my next trip, I'm going to certainly log into Roamli.
Definitely appreciate it. Yep. Let me know and we'll make sure we get some other good tours up there for you.
Oh, that would be great. Because most of the European cities have, when I travel, I notice that there's always a church or a cathedral, and then there are museums. And if you're by the river, there's stuff by the river. So I would say it's very nicely standard and depending on your taste, right? And I like that. And which is why I can just literally look at what I want to see on the flight.
Yeah. And that's the nice thing about European cities, right? And in Asia and a lot of other continents, right? Where the cities are built generally as walking cities. And that's just that, one, the history behind them, but two, how they've evolved. Whereas in the States, right, I would probably argue, and then some people can counter argue, but most cities in the US are not walking cities. And so whether you have a car or whether you take public transportation, it's certainly not as easy to, aside from New York or a few select cities, in LA, right, you're definitely not really walking around the entire landscape of the city. And so you're hamstringed a little bit on what you could do, of course, like you said, versus, Amsterdam or Paris or even just most cities in Europe. You're at least able to go along the waterfront, to your point, and see a lot of those cool things that have been around for centuries.
And so moving to the next topic that you're passionate about is Gildre.
Yes, yep.
Is that how I pronounce it?
Exactly. Yep, Gildre. It's spelled Gildre, which we know, right? It could be Gildre, but from the older English pronunciation of Gildre, that's how it's evolved, or that's how we started it at that point.
What did you want to achieve when you started it?
So the biggest thing for us, and I think from someone who kind of grew up on the early age of LinkedIn and network, and even like MySpace, right? When social networking and Xanga even before that, right? When that was coming up, I think a lot of what social media and what the social landscape offers online is great, but I think it also detracts from a lot of the human experiences, right, that we develop, whether it is in person or just online in that landscape. So when LinkedIn first started, a lot of it was, and it's still a great product now, but I think a lot of it was, hey, you connect with your coworkers, right? You connect with someone you met at a networking event or at a conference. You connect with someone that you've worked with in one way or the other, right? Or things like that. And now it's a powerful sales tool, right? But I'm sure you see your fair share. I'm sure people listening have seen their fair share of people, whether it's lead gen services or virtual assistants or right software development, selling and things like that. And most of these people, right, I've never heard of or met, or most people have. And that's not a problem. But I think, again, we've moved so far away from developing these really meaningful connections and relationships and into like, oh, you can just aimlessly scroll on YouTube Shorts or TikTok, right, and see all these different creators. And likewise, same with LinkedIn. And so for us, it was how do we get back to the basics and create really a group or a community or really an ecosystem with vetted subject matter experts, with individuals, executives, builders, innovators who've done it before, whether successfully or not, but kind of like our journey, right? Who have failed at points and learned from them to be able to teach others and actually care about lifting each other up. And so there's certainly no shortage of communities or entrepreneurial communities out there, mind you. But I think for us, it was, while we are, yes, invite only, we're open to anyone in the sense that wants to put in the work and do that. So we're not restricted to say, hey, you need to have 10 million in annual recurring revenue, or hey, you need to be right a founder in these specific industries and these regions, right? We're very inclusive to that extent. It's just making sure that you have to have. That's why we don't necessarily call it an entrepreneurial community. It is for innovators and builders, whereas we have artists and athletes and people in those industries, right, that aren't the traditional like business exec, if you will. But in today's day and age, there's so many different ways to grow a business or to start a business. So we wanted to kind of remove the antiquated concept behind that and just, again, create a space where people can network and make friends and make connections at a deeper level instead of just kind of clicking through profiles and going on to the next one.
I see. How many members are there?
So we've got about 140 members currently, and predominantly in North America, but also all over the globe. So from Africa, Asia, Europe, LATAM, Australia, all across. So we try to host a lot of our events. While they are all virtual, we try to host them in somewhat of a similar time zone. So that way we can get everyone across plus 14 hours to Central Standard Time, to Pacific Time, still able to join and meet up with other members.
And is it a paid community?
It is, yep. So when we looked at it, we wanted to make sure it's month to month, right? So no different than, we kind of think of it as almost your virtual country club or your virtual gym in that sense, where we do know a lot of these programs and incubators and accelerators or just other communities. You have these big initiation fees, right, or onboarding fees, and then you have this big annual fee, or you're giving up equity or things like that. For us, it's just, again, we get that as a founder especially, people are not getting paid or maybe paying themselves as much as if they were working at a standard maybe 9-to-5 job. And so for even our gold tier, right, which is kind of our standard core membership, after the interview, if you get selected, that's $59 a month. And so we wanted to make sure that regardless of your region, regardless of what you're building, you're still having an opportunity to be able to join. And again, we always said you won't hurt our feelings, right? If you join for a few months and hopefully get a lot of value out of it and end up leaving after 3-4 months, that's fine. There's no contract. You can just kind of cancel your membership or pause at any point. And our goal is to just be able to drive as much value as we can on a long-term basis through our executive workshops, right? Through our speed networking events, through our thought leadership series and fireside chats with executives and CEOs and high performing individuals that you can ideally hear and ask questions to directly versus just listening to a podcast, right? Or watching an interview on YouTube, something like that.
And so it's really quite interactive, but then you you choose it. And I remember I used to join this, I was part of this thing called, I think, Lunch Club.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was an interesting concept because you find someone, you say these are the skills that you want, and then they make a meeting with you. I started it towards the end of the pandemic, and then, the interactive meetings took over. So I didn't continue with that. But I can really see, do you do any matchmaking internally?
Absolutely. That's a big piece of what we do. And I think with members so we have 3 tiers. And for example, with our platinum tier, where members do identify, we always kind of ask them through an extensive interview process and white glove onboarding process. Hey, let's talk about your goals for the next 3, 6, 9 months. What's your biggest opportunity area right now, right? Are you looking to kind of start your influencer marketing program, right? Maybe you've never dealt with the world of TikTok and stuff before. Hey, let's pair you with the head of social media marketing at company X, right? Who worked with tens and $20 million programs and campaigns. Or hey, you're looking to, you've got your first 10 customers and you're looking to expand to the next 100. Let's pair you with a growth marketing expert, growth hacking expert, right? Who's been able to do that exact same thing with their company. And to us, yes, a lot of the best mentorships are formed organically, but a big philosophy we have is everyone's only really one connection away from completely changing their own personal trajectory, the trajectory of their business or their career. And that's all it takes, right? And a lot of people want to be able to give back and do that altruistically without, anything internally. And I think that follows closely with Brad Felt over at Techstars, his philosophy as well, in terms of, give first, and the idea that as humans, right, like we all should want to help each other and lift each other up. And sometimes I get it, not everyone has time to be able to just do that with countless people, without anything at some point in return. But if you generally at least take the mindset to be able to want to give back and give first, then when it's your turn, or then eventually if you do need something, you've built this great ecosystem and network and connections that they know, hey, this person I would vouch for, I would help with because they've done this for me, right? Because they looked out for me without wanting anything in return. And that's what we've been looking at. That's what we've been building essentially for the past 6 months when we launched Gildre.
So you launched it just 6 months ago?
Yes, yep, in June of this year. So yeah, it's been a fun ride.
That is impressive.
Yeah, it's been great teammates with Tyga and Michael Frank that I've worked with, over many days and many long nights, kind of building this out. But again, it's because we've got a great community too. I think just so many passionate members and mentors and people in the space that it's really heartwarming, kind of nice seeing these different connections. One, we make connections ourselves, but hearing the stories of people, oh yeah, we realized we were both in New York and we just grabbed a coffee, or oh, we met up at this conference. And it's kind of these nice little facilitations that were unplanned, but makes community all worthwhile.
Absolutely. So I hear 2 big ventures. Where does your heart lie?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at risk of, of my other founders on both sides, I think Roamli's obviously that was the original baby, right? And I think that's where we started that, because that is right. We see a big problem, not just during the pandemic, but still today, where a lot of these groups, it's easy to promote, maybe not easy, but it's when you're promoting visiting New York City or visiting Chicago or visiting Paris, right? Like history and a lot of that does it itself, right? You don't have as much problems promoting those regions versus maybe smaller destinations or local destinations, or especially how do you get the person who's lived in the city in Chicago for 30 years to go out and explore these different things that maybe they haven't thought about doing, right? They go to the same restaurant every Friday, they go to the same area, they walk this path to work. How do you really get them to go continue to branch out? And so we realize that's still a big problem that we're seeing, that a lot of people are experiencing groups every day. So for me, Roamli is still a big piece of that. And on the flip side, with Gildre, that's really just been a fun place to be able to also work with founders and understand everyone's got such a different pain point or such a different opportunity area that they're going through, right? Whether you're a 3X founder and you've been doing this for 30, 40 years, but you're starting in a new industry, right? Maybe you've been in CPG for your whole 30 years and now you want to kind of build a machine learning or LLM based startup, right? Working with manufacturers, that's a completely different realm. And likewise, right? We're a big proponent of really kind of two-way learning where it doesn't matter if you're an 18-year-old entrepreneur or a 70-year-old entrepreneur, or you've been in one industry for 20 years versus just learning. People can endlessly learn from each other. And so by putting the right people together, that's why a lot of people, you can bring out the best from both sides. And so I think because of the excitement of community and the individuals that make up Gildre and the overall tech and entrepreneurial ecosystem, I think Gildre is just such a big focus for us too. So I don't want to be cliche and say 50-50, but both of them just hold a really meaningful place in my heart in terms of wanting to build those. We're not, neither business. I'm in it for the money, if you will, in the sense that I don't expect community to make me millions and millions of dollars, right? Nor do I expect working with individual chambers or DMOs to be able to do that. But for me, this is a problem that's been around for a while. And if we can work with some really fun organizations and cool people to help them and help take them to the next level, that's more than enough for me.
I mean, this is my challenge too. I have an interest in different things. And it's a question of what am I focused on now? And what is it going to bring me at least in the next 6 months to 1 year?
Because I know you've had such an amazing kind of entrepreneurial background too, in so many different and exciting projects. And for me, it was how do you balance that? And I've had luckily the privilege of being able to do these full time, right, without having to also balance another kind of career at the time. But I understand not everyone gets that opportunity. And so for me, it's how it doesn't need to be this glorification of working 20-hour days, right? And that hustle culture,
no,
right?
You don't need that. No.
Yeah, again, it's just setting wrong expectations. One, for younger entrepreneurs or people that want to get into it. But two, it kind of, again, you can be an entrepreneur and build something 2-3 hours a day, right? Whether it's casually or whatnot. But I get it. At a certain point, you do need to, if that's what you really want to focus on, you do need to put your heart into it. But again, heart's not always equal just that manic, 18, 20 hours obsession over something.
Yeah, I am with you on that. And I've started having a trademark question for this show, which is, are you an entrepreneur or an innovator?
That's a good one. And I'd be curious, I'll have to go listen to some of the other answers from your other guests as well. But I would say for me, I'm more of an entrepreneur. And for kind of my thought process behind that is, I won't pretend I was the best student growing up or I was the most creative or the most, I'd like to think that innovation is still a part of our process and my process too, in terms of the new features and products and things we want to provide and service for our customers. But for me, a lot about being an entrepreneur is about solving problems. It's just about understanding and identifying problems, right? Similar in product, you need to understand what opportunities there are for customers. Maybe they love a product, right? And they think I spend hours on this a day and I can't imagine them doing anything else to improve this. But I'm sure for Instagram or TikTok, I met a lot of these companies say, okay, great. They're spending 30 minutes on the app. How do we get them to spend 60 minutes on the app? And so for an entrepreneur, it's part of how do you really work through a lot of these struggles? How do you kind of have that grit and determination to kind of keep pushing forward when all kind of looks lost? And for me, I would say that's kind of more of my strength versus the truly creative side and innovating on existing ideas. They both go hand in hand, but I think when you look at, if you were to look at as two paths between the innovator and the entrepreneur, innovator definitely kind of has that creative type. They're able to kind of talk to customers and learn and really understand what they want. And then the entrepreneur kind of helps make that a reality, right? Deals with a lot of the other challenges that goes into that, not just, aside from scoping and everything else, to be able to say, okay, what are the financial metrics we need to make this happen? What's the manpower we need to make this happen? What's the timeline? Are we too early in the market? Are we too late in the market? So all these other challenges that the innovator also knows about. That's why I think the best team kind of pairs them together to launch a product.
And do you have entrepreneurship in your family?
Yes and no. I would say through my upbringing, right? I had the pleasure, very comfortable life with two parents where Like I said, mom was at Kraft for over 30 years. Dad was at IBM for same thing, over 20 to 30 years. Just that generation, right, was very much more embedded in, hey, you work, you find a great company to work at, you stay there, you get your 401k, you build up your pension and all of that. And that was perfect, right, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even really a little bit over a decade ago. But I'm sure, as you've seen, and a lot of listeners are probably also experiencing, right, that's massively shifted in the past 10 years and even much more so in the past 5 years. And I think that there's still a lot of people doing that, and that's still a great career path for a lot of people. But I think you need to be able to kind of evolve your skill set from time to time. And so being able to take so much and learn so much from my parents, throughout their careers and apply that to my own and my entrepreneurial side, I think has gotten me to that point where I am now. So I think you need a little bit of both. I think it's tough, right? There certainly are a lot of individuals that do that maybe it's right out of high school, right? Or even whether you do a little bit of college, you just jump right into the entrepreneurial realm. I think that works, right? But I do think it's almost kind of like an MBA where it's good to kind of get some good years of corporate experience or some years of that traditional experience before either launching a venture or before going to get your business degree, right? Things like that. So having a little bit of both, I think, is a good basis to help you be successful.
Yeah, and I think it's actually good to be an employee before you become an employer. You have that other perspective.
100%.
And is it fair to assume that you are a second generation immigrant?
Yeah, I would say that is correct. So my mom immigrated here from Taiwan. My dad was born in New York, but for both of them, they wanted me to go to the traditional, go to the Ivy League school and get my business degree, right? Go into maybe it's iBanking or maybe something like that. And great career, right? And I think there's a lot of successful people who do just that, and that's an amazing, fulfilling role. And I think for me, somewhere along the way, not necessarily from K through 12 or just growing up, but I think for me, my path just wanted to veer a little bit differently. And so they've been extremely supportive throughout the journey as well, it's been great. But and same thing, obviously, with my wife and my family too. So I think that's kind of the last biggest piece throughout that journey is you can't really do it alone, right? Whether or not you have that family support unit or even just friends that understand. I think that's a big piece because, there were many years where I understand, right? I could probably be making more if I was going in that traditional corporate job or doing something like that. But I think just having people around you understand why you're doing it and why, what problem you're trying to solve, I think that goes a long way with helping shape the journey because it is so much about just staying on the path and staying motivated, whether it's with the first idea or the seventh idea. But I think just like anything, right? Just because you go into entrepreneurship doesn't mean you can't go back into the corporate realm at some point and vice versa. So what you said earlier about it's always good to have a few years being an employee before being an employer, I think you get to see both sides of it, right? How you want to be able to build a good culture for your team, whether it's a 5-person team or whether it's a 500-person team. And so both of those are extremely important to give you a good basis to be a leader. And at times you won't always be the leader, right? You need to be able to lean on your co-founder or step aside to allow your advisors or your board kind of take much more of a day-to-day role. So lots of moving pieces to it, but that's to me what's exciting about being an entrepreneur in that realm.
And as I was listening to Roamli and Gildre, I realized, at least in my brain, that there was one connection, which is basically communities and networking, right? In Roamli, people want to experience the locations, cities, they do it through travel, and then Gildre is connecting people. So I call it like an ecosystem. You are involved in the process of building, nurturing, and accelerating ecosystems. And I know that COVID showed to the world what isolation does, right? So considering the fact that we are now past COVID, the worst of COVID, let's say, what is your outlook for this ecosystem that you are building through your ventures?
Yeah, great question, right? I think that when you think of the roller coaster of the pandemic, that exemplified or that really kind of shone that spotlight on a lot of issues that we see with communities here today, just across society, whether you look at how social media impacted it or just on a personal level. But I think when you look at just communities as a whole, and there's a reason why you look at some of the people that live the longest, right? And whether it's societies like Japan or what have you, where they have that strong sense of family or community, whether it's through their neighbors. And it's tough, right? From someone who understands, right? We were all in it, from being kind of locked in our houses and apartments for months and years, what felt like at a time. And it's certainly tough. And I think what makes communities so unique is that each community truly is the sum of its members, right? Who's part of the community, whether it's the community on your same street on your block, whether it's the community that you've built online, whether it's your friend group that you've had, or family and cousins and connections. Each community is so unique. And so regardless of the pandemic, right, that will always be a big factor, I think, till the end of time, right? And when you look at whether it's Roamli or Gildre or any of the countless communities out there through Reddit and through Facebook and Meta and these different groups, I think it's important to find others that have similar interests as you and want to do similar things, but also challenge those assumptions and challenge what you know. You can't just surround yourself with people who have that kind of say, who will, not be yes men, right? But will always support, what you're thinking, right? It's, to me, the best part of communities is being able to have different opinions, right? Whether it's on how business operates, whether it's political opinions, right? Whether it's just what have you, personal things. And so obviously that can be contentious at times, right? And I don't think that I don't advocate that every community has to have that. But again, just to be a more rounded human and a more rounded individual and contribute to a community, you need those different perspectives. So I think, yes, till the end of time, communities will always play a big role, one for personal growth, but to be able to just develop yourself professionally, whether it's in your career, whether it's starting your own company, whether it's, trying to become an advisor or mentor on a board of director role, anything like that. There's just so many opportunities to do it. And again, it only takes one connection, one introduction to completely change the landscape or the next, right, 30, 40, 50 years of what your career looks like.
I love it. To the power of one connection.
Absolutely.
Yes. So on that note, I want to thank you. You are now a very valued member of the Innovation Oddysey podcast community.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate it and excited to hopefully getting to chat more and obviously listen to some of the other episodes and connect with some of the other amazing guests.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Brian, for your time, and wish you the best.
Thank you, Renu. Appreciate it. Have a great day.